it's reached a deal with district health boards over safer rosters. DHBs aren't commenting, but the union says hospitals have allowed doctors to keep a power of veto over roster changes in return for clarity in the collective agreement that the doctors intend to work the new rosters. The union's General Secretary, Deborah Powell, says the agreement is a relief, but trust has taken a battering during the acrimonious row. DHBs won't comment until the deal's ratified by chief executives tomorrow. That will avert a further 3-day strike, which RNZ News understands the doctors had approved. The father of one of the 185 people who died in the Christchurch quake has described a new memorial as magnificent. The 150-metre memorial wall on the banks of the Avon, with the names of the victims inscribed, will be unveiled in Christchurch at midday to mark today's 6th anniversary. The families of the victims had a private preview yesterday. The chair of the Earthquake Families Trust, Bruce McKeegan, whose son died in the quake, told Morning Report seeing the memorial for the first time was overwhelming for some families.
The wall looks absolutely magnificent, and it's going to perform every function that the families wanted it to perform. So it's peaceful, it's quiet, it's a very reflective space, and being right down the River Avon, you get lovely vistas looking underneath the Montreal Street Bridge, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
Bruce McKeegan says he expects to visit the memorial often. And construction is finally due to start on all but one of the government's anchor projects in Christchurch. They were supposed to be a magnet for private developers, but instead that development's happened anyway, thanks to investors who couldn't wait for the projects to start. Last year, the government set up Otakaro Limited to kickstart work on a convention centre, an Olympic swimming pool and Central City apartments. Asked if the ship has already sailed on using the projects to attract private investment, Otakaro's chief executive Albert Brantley had this to say.
Well, if you look at the real purpose of the anchor projects, it is very much about galvanizing places for people. The anchor projects are about making an attractive place for people to live and work.
Albert Brantley is confident the convention centre and swimming pool will be built within 3 years, but there's still no date for the city's new stadium. The latest RNZ News poll of polls shows National's public support is holding steady after Bill English replaced John Key as Prime Minister at the end of last year. National is sitting on just over 46.5%, close to where it was before John Key's resignation last December and very close to its 2014 election result. Labour's support has picked up slightly from where it was polling in the second half of last year, now averaging 28.5%. The Greens are on 11.5%, which alongside Labour gives those two parties 40%. New Zealand First is polling at 9.7, twice where it was at this time before the 2014 election. The Hastings District Mayor Lawrence Yule has been selected as National's candidate for the Tukituki electorate for September's election. Mr Yule is also the President of Local Government New Zealand and has been Mayor for 15 years. He replaces Craig Foss, who is retiring, as National's candidate for the electorate, which covers most of the Southern Hawke's Bay, including Hastings, Flaxmere and Havelock North. Mr Foss won the seat with a 6,500-strong majority in 2014. Residents in the West Auckland suburb of Oratia are adamant they will fight a proposal to build a huge water treatment plant in their neighbourhood. As many as 18 families could lose their homes if Watercare decides to build the plant there. Anusha Bradley reports.
Hundreds of residents met last night, angry over a plan to build a replacement for the 90-year-old Huia plant in Titirangi. They say the Parker Road proposal would destroy not only homes but also the community. Watercare says it would cost more to put a new plant on the existing Huia site, while building on a site it owns next door would mean removing native bush. The company says independent commissioners will hear from those affected and make a decision later this year. Cornusha Bradley Aho.
The Transport Agency says it's a long way from allowing cyclists to run red lights. A report commissioned by the agency has looked at allowing children and their parents to ride on footpaths, and that's led to protests that puts pedestrians' safety at risk. The agency's cycling manager, Dougal List, says the report also considered allowing cyclists to go through a red light, turning left, or going across a T intersection. He told Morning Report the idea needed a lot more thought before it could be considered for implementation.
We do need to ensure that it's well considered to ensure that it's not resulting in unintended consequences or impacts on other road users. So it's very much about considering the policy options, looking at trials and really working through that process in a quite considered way.
Dougal List of the Transport Agency. The French far-right National Front presidential candidate Marine Le Pen has cancelled a meeting with Lebanon's top cleric for Sunni Muslims after refusing to wear a headscarf for the encounter. The cleric's office says Ms Le Pen's aides had been informed beforehand that a headscarf was required for the meeting and had been surprised by her refusal. French law bans headscarves in the public service and for high school pupils in the name of church-state separation and equal rights for women. Marine Le Pen wants to extend this ban to all public places. That's the news. With sport, here's Barry Guy.
The New Zealand pace bowler Trent Boult says the main aim for him this season has been to try and grow the skill set as he tries to overcome a lack of swing in his bowling. It seems to be working as he took 2 for 8 in their T20 game against South Africa. And while he went for 1 for 45 in the opening ODI, he attracted a $1 million deal from the IPL this week. The two sides meet in the second ODI in Christchurch today, and Boult says they're always working on strategies.
The focus has been on how can I get wickets if the ball's not swinging. Lucky enough to have Tim as a very close friend who's an internationally renowned bowler as well. So a lot of discussions and thinking on your feet and trying to do things when you're out there in the heat of the battle. But it's going nicely at the moment.
Meanwhile, the batsman Dean Brownlee says getting Proteas captain AB de Villiers out quickly in today's game will be key to their success.
In the last game specifically, we try to let him avoid the strike as much as we can and put pressure on the other guys. And to the other guys' credit, they did the job as well. So that was one thing I thought we did well. And hopefully we can keep coming up with ideas to, like I said, limit his job.
Dean Brownlee. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola wants his players to embrace the pressure of their Champions League last 16 tie against Monaco this morning, even though he knows the club's critics will kill them if they do not progress. Ex-Barcelona and Bayern Munich boss Guardiola has won the competition twice as a coach and never failed to reach the semi-finals in 7 attempts.
They are intelligent, physically strong, they arrive to the box. Complete team, so it's the most successful team in Europe in terms to score goals. So tough draw, because they are a real good team.
Pep Guardiola. Also this morning, Bayer Leverkusen meet Atletico Madrid. Meanwhile, London club Sutton United have accepted the resignation of reserve goalkeeper Wayne Shaw, who is under investigation for potentially breaching betting rules after eating a pie during their FA Cup game against Arsenal yesterday. And the Hurricanes flanker Callum Gibbons will head to Scotland later this year, signing a 3-year deal with the Glasgow Warriors. And that's sport.
Tonight on Nights, is it time we took a more Australian approach to reducing the risk of wildfires, given Christchurch just suffered a fire on an Australian scale? I speak with the fire researcher Grant Pearce. Simon Morris reviews the latest from Martin Scorsese during At the Movies, and Johnny Blades discusses things specific, including Australia's dumb idea to send asylum seekers to the United States, on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're on air online and iHeartRadio. The forecast from Met Service to midnight, Northland to Waitomo and also Taupo and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells and isolated showers. Taranaki to Whanganui, also Taumarunui and Taihape, fine at times. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine. Manawatu to Wellington, fine, with areas of cloud morning and night. Nelson and Marlborough, sunny. Bulla cloudy at times, patchy rain late afternoon and evening. Westland and Fiordland, rain, sometimes heavy from the glaciers southwards. Clearing from Fiordland this morning and from Westland by evening. Canterbury, high cloud with rain. Otago and Southland, scattered rain clearing this morning and then mostly fine, though still a few showers for Stewart Island. Chatham Islands, cloudy. In the main centres today, Auckland cloud at times, brief morning drizzle, light winds and 24. Tauranga just some cloud morning and evening, light winds and 23. Hamilton brief drizzle clearing to a fine morning, light winds and 25. Wellington mostly sunny, bit of cloud around morning and from late evening, northerlies 22. Christchurch finds some high cloud, southerly change brings cloud by evening 28 degrees. Dunedin brief morning rain and then cloudy at times, a southerly change and a high of 21. This is RNZ National. It's 8:10.
Thanks, Nicola. Well, good morning. And here we are again, just a few months after the Mount Roskill by-election, this time in neighbouring Mount Albert, where again the sitting Labour MP has moved on. And on Saturday, it's by-election time. The voters aren't spoilt for choice in this central Auckland seat. 13 candidates, Although if you're shopping for somebody wearing one of those big party brands, you won't find National Act or New Zealand First there. We're joined this morning for our debate by 3 candidates in alphabetical order. And just a reminder that if you actually want to watch proceedings, you can do so on Freeview Channel 50, the way you watch Checkpoint, or on Morning Report's Facebook page where it's being screened live. So we're joined this morning, as I say, by Labour List MP Jacinda Ardern, Greens List MP Julianne Genter and Jeff Simmons, testing the combat readiness of Gareth Morgan's The Opportunities Party, and you have to say the, otherwise you don't get the acronym TOP. So just so people understand that. So good morning to you all. Welcome to the debate.
Good morning.
Good morning. First to you two, Jacinda Ardern and Julianne Genter. Labour and the Greens now have quite a formal, cosy relationship. So for Mount Albert voters, what's the difference? Give us a couple of areas where there's, a huge divide between the policies of Labour and the Greens that might help people decide. Julianne, you want to...
I don't think there's a huge divide. We're both united and working together in the sense of wanting to change the government and take New Zealand in a more progressive direction. But there are some subtle differences. For example, on housing policy, the Green Party advocates for a comprehensive capital gains tax. The rest of our housing policy is very similar. On public transport, obviously I have specific expertise in that area, and I've been advocating for better public transport in Auckland and even living in that area for over a decade now.
Yeah, I think it's certainly fair to say, Todd, that our aspirations are certainly similar around resolving the housing crisis. We want a tax on speculators, for instance, and on public transport, we've already announced that we'd like to co-fund with council light rail from the city down Dominion Road, just as an example of the kind of infrastructure we believe central government needs to pitch in for in Auckland. But certainly there are some similar aspirations, but that's probably only being highlighted really by the absence of National in this campaign. The fact that the Greens and Labour are running isn't unusual, and you'll see that of course in the general election across the board. The fact that National was chosen to opt out of that race has probably just highlighted that.
Jeff Simmons, I guess that gives you the job of being the one to highlight the differences. You've said that you being an economist, makes a natural choice for anyone interested in a strong economy. Why?
Well, obviously myself and Gareth both have a big background as economists and advisors on policy, so we have a strong experience in that area. But yeah, there is no National here, so there is, both of the other candidates are already in Parliament, so Mount Albert has the opportunity for a 3-for-1 here. They could have 3 people representing them if they voted for me, and they have no one between the other 2 candidates, no one prepared to work with the government of the day, so that's what the Opportunities Party offers.
So you're carrying yourself as the centre-right guy in this mix, or...?
Well, I guess comparatively, but we consider ourselves centrist, prepared to work with Labour or National.
OK, so let's get on to some of the big issues. First one, housing. Jeff, I had a look on your website. I couldn't find a housing policy.
Well, we have a tax reform policy, and that's really focused on housing. Housing is probably the area. New Zealand has the biggest gap between the tax treatment of housing and all other assets of
so
anywhere in the
OECD.
OECD.
Tax on housing.
Well, no, it's much more than the capital gains tax. It is closing all of the tax loopholes, including imputed rental. So that would get rid of, really kill the incentive to speculate in housing completely. We are the only party that has a policy that really can guarantee a return to housing affordability.
So that tax stuff, that may rearrange who owns the houses that are there. In what way does it actually build the vast number of houses that Auckland needs?
Well, when you look at the current incentive setup, Julianne and Jacinda like to say that the market is broken because it's not building houses, but actually the market isn't broken. It's doing exactly what the tax incentives provide, which is land banking. We would get rid of the incentive to land bank, we'd make it expensive to land bank, and that would get developers building pretty quick.
We need more than just housing. We need complete neighbourhoods, and that's where there really is a role for central and local government in ensuring that we have comprehensive master planning and that we're building for the long term. I think the other problem we have in Auckland is that private developers tend to be aiming for the high end of the market, and they're often going for what's most profitable, not necessarily what's going to build the city for the long term.
Well, talking about the high end of the market you mentioned there, I mean, parts of Mount Albert, $1 million average house prices. Is Mount Albert basically going to be an electorate for rich folk?
Well, it certainly shouldn't be that. The median age of people in Mount Albert is 33. There's 40% are renting. There are people living in Mount Albert who, of course, aspire to be first home buyers. And where
do Labour policies change Mount Albert?
Where I would contest what Jeff has said is that his assumption is that his policies of a tax on the family home is all that is required. What we've been working on is the fact that we're not actually bringing on stream large-scale affordable housing programs. The average house that's being built in Auckland is 200 square metres, and only 5% of the new builds are affordable.
But so Mount Albert's not really Kiwi build territory, though, is it? You can't build big tracts of social or affordable housing in Mount Albert.
Well, there are already spaces in Mount Albert around, for instance, right in the centre of Mount Albert, where there are Housing New Zealand has created special housing areas. Unitec has a large-scale development. Those are large building programs where you'd hope to see some affordable housing mixed in there. But as Julianne has said, for those larger scale builds, we need general planning overall to ensure that the transport planning is right in there and that we have the schooling infrastructure, which is very squeezed in Mount Albert. And that's where we'd like to see that overlay of an affordable housing authority, making sure that master planning is happening.
So you're signing up to the government's urban development authority that they're talking about?
No, it's not the same as what they've been talking about. Their master planning hasn't been that comprehensive.
Julianne Genter, if you were to look at the Mount Albert electorate in 10 or 20 years' time, what's it going to look like? Are we going to have apartments down the arterial roads?
That's certainly already happening in parts of the electorate along Great North Road, and I think there are some opportunities where land is really not being used in a particularly attractive or useful way. But in order to ensure that we get that high quality design that we want, that we have energy efficient buildings, that we have water sensitive design, that we have the public transport infrastructure we need, there's a role for government to be leading on that. And the way Nationals approach their urban development authorities, it looks like it's really just an opportunity for investors to make more money. I mean, they're particularly looking at foreign investment. I don't think we need that. That's not really going to solve our housing problem, and it's not going to build the city we want for the long term.
Just back to Jeff. Jeff, Labour, interestingly, wants to loosen up the rural-urban boundary around Auckland, sort of let the sprawl a bit more loosely. Where do you stand on that?
I contest that, Jeff, but I'll let Todd, I'll let Jeff answer.
So you want
first.
the rural-urban boundary to remain?
We want intensive spatial planning, but we believe that the urban boundary limit is currently fueling speculators and land banking by drip feeding land back into the area for development. So we do still want proper spatial planning, which is not about sprawl; it's about building along transport
Jeff,
nodes.
Rural-urban boundary stays or goes?
Well, just to clarify our tax reform policy after Jacinda's characterisation of it, we're proposing a tax on all assets, and that would be returned to people on income tax cuts. 80% of people would be better off. Now, that would give a strong incentive to intensify in the centre of the city. We would see because people would be paying for people would be paying for the value of that asset. They'd have a strong incentive to get the most value out of the land that is the most valuable land. So
if you're sitting on an underdeveloped site with just a bungalow on it, there's a tax incentive to do more. So
there would be a tax incentive to do more with
that.
That's
death
right.
of the bungalow?
Well, not necessarily. Of course, that's why we have the planning rules that they would continue to be in place. But we would see a strong incentive to build more in the central city. As far as the urban planning, the urban boundary goes, yes, we need a greater incentive to intensify in the centre, and also what we would favour is a congestion charge, which again would take away that incentive to sprawl, because that sprawl actually puts greater costs on the roading infrastructure.
Let's move on to transport. Mount Albert is going to be at some point the first to get light rail in Auckland. So when and who pays? I'll start with you, Jeff, on that one.
Well, I think Auckland is growing very rapidly. It's already straining under that population growth. Its infrastructure is under immense strain. We're looking at 2 million by 2030. I think.
So light rail?
Well, yeah, light rail. I think we're going to need to invest in all modes of transport. We need NZTA being prepared to invest in all modes of transport, and
So let's go to light rail. So yes, light rail. How does it get paid for?
Well, I think NZTA needs to be able to make some contribution to that particular conversation.
50-50?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair setup, and again, we need that congestion charge. We need the government has agreed that the congestion charge is on the cards, but we need to start working on it now to get it in within the next 4 or 5 years.
We're going to struggle to disagree on this one. Everyone's for light rail?
Yeah. And it's got to be a stepping stone towards rail to the airport. That has to be an absolute priority. And for light rail from the city down, as we've said, through to Dominion Road, we've said that that's a piece of infrastructure we should be supporting council to provide. Of course, council have offered up trying to ensure there's a greater local contribution via regional fuel tax, but that's been rejected by government. I think that was wrong. That was an opportunity for council to try and enhance its revenue streams to try and fund some of these massive projects.
Transport budget should be paying for critical transport infrastructure, including public transport infrastructure,
50-50
like light rail.
or completely government?
At least 50-50, and there is the opportunity to give local councils the ability to raise revenue in a way that's actually going to work better for funding infrastructure for the long term, rather than just relying on rates. The reality is central government's collecting a lot of tax revenue, and then they're expecting councils to invest in long-term infrastructure just from rates, and they're quite limited in their ability to borrow.
In terms of where this money comes from, you touched on that, Jeff. So the Mayor wants a regional fuel tax, preferably yesterday. The government is talking at some time in the future, some form of tolling or road pricing. Which way do you go?
We're firmly in favour of road pricing, but you may need some sort of fuel tax in the short term while that's being set up, because that's going to take a few years to sort out.
I don't think that congestion pricing is the first thing we do to fix Auckland. It only exists in 5 cities overseas, all of which had greater employment, residential density, had greater use of public transport, greater supply, higher prices for parking, smaller supply of parking. There's many things we can do before we need a congestion charge in Auckland. It's bizarre that people have gone to that first, because at the moment, the way they're proposing it, it's really just a way to raise revenue to pay for more highways, which isn't really the best way to reduce congestion. And it's not going to make it easier for people to get around the city. People need to have better public transport, better walking and cycling. We need a more balanced transport system before we start charging people.
Labour, fuel tax or congestion pricing?
Yeah, and we've already said that we supported the ability for revenue gathering via a regional fuel tax. In fact, we brought it in, but of course that was done by the government. We are spending 35% of our budget here on roading. We've got to open up the Land Transport Fund to multiple modes so that we can have a proper argument about the cost benefit of public transport versus roading, and that's where you'd see a massive increase in investment. But we've got a $17 billion plus infrastructure deficit overall in Auckland, and this is just one part of it. And in other ways, we've been front-loading some of the infrastructure costs onto, for instance, some of our new developments. Our view is we've got to change our thinking in the way that we fund some of those projects, and infrastructure bonds is a real opportunity for us to plug a gap where actually there's gaps for bond market.
New territory that we might not have time to explore.
But it is another mechanism that we should use to be able to fund some of those massive projects.
Let's fast forward to September. Let's imagine, as I'm sure Andrew Little does, that Labour ends up with a shot at forming a government. Where does this Green-Labour relationship go after Election Day in September, particularly, for example, if New Zealand First turns out to have, more seats than the Green Party? Are you locked in? Are you locked in as the first option on a coalition?
We're not locked into anything. It's all about what happens on Election Day, and that's the opportunity for voters to say which parties they want in Parliament, to the extent they want them represented, and then based on how people vote, we will try to form a government. And obviously our first choice is going to be talking to Labour, and it's the Green Party's goal to go out there and get a whole lot more votes. So I really hope that we're not going to need to rely on New Zealand First, and definitely that the Green Party is going to get more votes than New Zealand First.
But you're campaigning almost as a team. So, I mean, is Labour committed to Greens
I'd correct that, Todd. We have campaigned as individuals who have acknowledged that it's possible to campaign in a general and a by-election in such a way that's not antagonistic, that is a contest of ideas and a discussion and a debate about the future of Auckland in particular. What the MOU has done, though, is given transparency to voters. It's demonstrated, if we're able, in the position to form a government, that we're likely to be in a coalition with the Greens, and people know when they go into ballot box what that would look like.
And perhaps another party. So let's raise Andrew Little yesterday calling the Māori Party the Māori branch of the National Party. Is that your view as well?
Well, that's simply based on the fact that they've, on every occasion, gone into coalition and supported the national government. So
you'd be happy in a coalition with Māori Party?
Sorry?
You would be happy being in a coalition with the Māori Party?
To date, they've shown no interest interest in working alongside us and have instead chosen to prop up the national government?
Well, I mean, it depends on what their policies are. And I think that in many instances, the Maori Party's policies are actually quite close to the Green Party's policies. So, I mean, the fact that they've chosen to work with the National Party now means that they aren't actually able to implement their policies and their values. So I think it's a tactical mistake. But yeah, we're not going to hold it against them forever. You know, what happens after Election Day is we work with the parties that we're have the most alignment with.
Jeff Simmons, if you win Mount Albert, let's just go there. If you win Mount Albert, what's your role in Parliament? Who do you end up, and if you survive in September, who do you end up aligning with?
Well, the Opportunities Party is all about solutions and long-term leadership, not politics. So we will work with whoever wants to put in place solutions that will work for the people of Mount Albert. Of course, over the next 7 months, that is only the national government. That's the only choice of people to work with, which is why we're the only real choice for someone who wants to make a difference over the next 7 months.
If you don't win this by-election, are you back in September for another crack?
I'd like to be. Of course, we're a small party. It depends on what other candidates come forward. We're just going through that process now. So, yeah, it depends where I'm needed, but I'd like to be here.
Jacinda Ardern, if you win, so you're already a list MP, you're off the list, Raymond Huo steps in.
Yes.
So does that create a gender balance issue, if trying to create a proper gender balance near the top of the list?
Yeah, for us, it's all about going forward, the way that our list looks and ensuring that we have a great range of candidates across our electorate seats as well. But I'll just take the opportunity on this question. Jeff has raised a lot throughout the campaign that we, as list candidates, it doesn't change anything. Well, actually, it really does. When you are a list MP, you don't have that mandate from the local community in the same way you do as an electorate MP. You don't have that responsibility and ability to advocate in the same way. It does fundamentally change things, and of course it changes who you bring in.
But if someone votes for you, Jacinda, they're voting for Raymond, really.
Last word from Julianne Genter. So if you get voted in, what happens on your list?
So if I win the Mount Albert electorate, we will get an additional Green List MP. His name's John Hart. He's fantastic. He's a farmer and an IT specialist. And of course, I'd just like to take the opportunity to point out that the Green Party will continue to successfully advocate for solutions for Auckland, whether we're in government or not. And we've proven that we've been able to do that and to deliver even outside of government.
As I'm sure the others would say they will as well. Thank you to the three of you for joining us, Jeff Simmons, Jacinda Ardern and Julianne Genter, and not forgetting, of course, the by-election voting day is on Saturday. Back to you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Todd. It's 28 minutes past 8. You're listening to Morning Report with Todd Niall and Susie Ferguson. Let's get a quick update on the markets. Back with us now, Jonathan Mitchell.
Hello again. United States back from their President's Day holiday and in the record zone. The Dow Jones Index up 106 points, 0.5% to 20,700.